This is the Amidon Planet Podcast birthday bonus episode. I am your host, Joel Amidon. That's right. It is the 1-year birthday of the Amidon Planet Podcast. Exactly 1 year ago to the day, I sat down in my clothes closet, hunkered down, and just hesitantly hit record on the computer and created the first episode of the Amidon Planet Podcast. But to show you how much I lacked in confidence, I didn't even call that first episode the first episode. I called it episode 0. And it was looking at the field manual, the Discipline Equals Freedom field manual from Jocko Willink, which just said, you know what, you got to go for things. You just got to act. You got to get going. And I was just hesitant. I was just so hesitant. I mean, even looking at some of the stuff that I did initially with the podcast behind the scenes, I started with the cheapest podcast hosting plan, which only had a certain amount of megabytes that was allowed. So that kind of explains the different format to the first episodes, where there was this like episode, but then there was a warm up and a bonus episode sort of wrapped up together each month. That's because I had a certain amount of megabytes in one. I wanted to use them all, but then that also meant I had to like really pay attention to the length of those episodes, because if I went over, I couldn't upload. And so I got really good at saying things quickly and clearly in order to create recordings that would be small enough to fit in my quota. Fast forward 1 year and 16 episodes later, and a lot has changed. I've embraced longer episodes, so I, sprung for that higher allotment of data per month due to the generous support of you, the listener. We'll get more to that later. I sought out guests to converse with on the podcast, found out, hey, we are smarter together, we can do better things together, so embracing that with the podcast and loving talking with, basically having excuses to have great conversations with people. I'm loving that. And have refined the focus of the podcast. It used to be about being better and teaching better. Let's, just focus just on teaching better. We're trying to teach better. And in essence, you're still getting better or being better. But let's say what it is. This is about teaching better and trying to extract those learnings from where we find it, whether it's a book about leadership written by a Navy SEAL, hashtag Jocko Willink, or a podcast by Rick Rubin about creativity in the music industry. I've learned that there are lessons everywhere that can be extracted to learn how to teach better. And that's not surprising. I mean, if you're a teacher, you see lessons everywhere. It's just wanting to share that with others. And so looking at that and thinking about all the different content and being excited about this next year of the podcast and thinking about all the different content got planned and those that are not planned, because that's what's kind of nice about this. It's kind of organic where things pop up. Like, for example, that Rick Rubin podcast on the Broken Record podcast. It was a suggestion by a colleague, Ellen Foster, who led me to this podcast, the Broken Record podcast with Malcolm Gladwell and Rick Rubin, that I was listening to one on Wyclef and saw these other podcasts with bands I liked, and so I'm like, whoa, there's some lessons here. And again, being able to share that was pretty organic. But then, on a side note, I've also had some learnings from this past year that, folks don't mind if I go away from kind of the original intent was to look at some books and stuff that's not directly related on teaching. I found out that you all don't mind if I completely just nerd out on teaching, specifically mathematics teaching, which is what I am. I'm a math teacher, and that's kind of what led me to this space. So why not talk about it? So episode 9, Teaching with Problems, which featured Magdalene Lampert's book, Teaching with Problems and the Problems of Teaching. And the latest episode, episode 16, which was Teaching Mathematics as Agape with Sam Gilbert, which basically was my dissertation from the University of Wisconsin. Both of those episodes were pretty dense with regards to the thinking about teaching and even some of the language that was in it. But those were some of the most downloaded episodes. So it's just there's two sorts of episodes that I'm seeing that people like. I mean, sort of these coming out of left field, like the Broken Record podcast, or talking about the Mr. Rogers book, which actually that was about education, but even some of the other, like Daniel Pink and the Rest book. I mean, people really like those books. But then also just these completely like nerd out on teaching books as well. So we're going to get a good mix of that going forward. And I've also just been completely overwhelmed in this last year by the support I've received from you, the listener. In the beginning, I made the comment that if only my mother listened to the podcast, I would be happy, because even in developing the content, I was learning a lot about how to teach it. I mean, I was learning something. And so if I was speaking to this microphone and nobody else was on the other end, it's still fine because I was having to refine my ideas and think about, okay, what am I learning? And then going into my classrooms or the classrooms I get a chance to interact with, or even the teachers I get to interact with, I get to share what I've learned. But what is cool is seeing that not only are people listening, but they are engaging with the content and also suggesting new content, which is exciting. And you're going to see some of that as well. So in the next few months, we have a lot of cool episodes planned, and I'm excited to share them with you as soon as they become available. So we're trying to keep a episode every 2 weeks going. Seems to be pretty sustainable, so sustainable pace. So we're going to keep that going. Some of you have... So one episode we have planned is some of you may have been on Facebook at Amidon Planet on Facebook, and you may have seen pictures of my trip to Kenya where I got to visit a bunch of schools. And so we're going, and that happened just a few weeks ago at the beginning of 2020. We have an episode planned where we're going to talk about what was learned in that trip and maybe some things, some lessons to extract from there. We also have some classic leadership books and teaching books where I have some mentors and leaders that I've interacted with in my past that were going to come on. It's so excited. I want to say it, but it just, part of me is I want to wait till we get those actually recorded before we mention them. But just let me, I think they're kind of exciting. So stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. Also, another exciting development is another podcast that is launched. It's the Teaching Math Teaching Podcast. Now, this one is sponsored by the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators, or AMTE. It's an organization I've been involved with for quite some time, but an idea was come up, and AMTE has been a growing organization. There's lots of math teacher educators out there. I mean, and math teacher educator could be anyone from someone like myself who's at a higher ed institution who teaches methods classes and teach teachers how to teach mathematics, but that also could be mathematics coaches at within a school district, could be professional developers who interact with school districts that teach teachers, could be cooperating teachers, so those that accept student teachers from universities like mine into their classrooms that interact with them and develop them as teachers, they are also math teacher educators. And so AMTE thought that it would be a good idea to share the wisdom of folks. So right now, actually, I am at the AMTE conference in Phoenix. And, you know, there's lots, I mean, just walking around and interacting with folks, there's so much value gained here. But what if you can't get here to the conference, right? And so the podcast becomes a way to disseminate some of the wisdom that I get to see and interact with here at the conference, or maybe through the professional relationships I have. How do we disseminate that information in a more broad way? Just like I'm finding that, and maybe able to share things that I'm learning about how to teach better through this podcast, the Amidon Planet Podcast. We're going to do some of the same things with the Teaching Math Teaching Podcast. Disseminate some wisdom about teaching math teaching. So that's why we named it as such. And also just basically kind of to fill that gap of, you know what, you first became, you were a really good math teacher and now you're the math coach for the district. What do you do, right? And so we're trying to, again, share some of the wisdom of folks that are in those positions, in those roles, that are doing the things that teachers of math teachers do, and trying to get it out there in a format that is that is easily accessible. Because not everybody can go to the conference, right? Not everyone has all these relationships that I've been blessed to have. And so myself, Dusty Jones from Sam Houston State, and Ava Thanheiser from Portland State University are the hosts, and we've got a variety of folks. So if you, wherever you found this podcast, eventually you'll be able to, if not already, be able to find the Teaching Math Teaching Podcast as well. And we'll have links to it on my various social media feeds. Okay. So just a quick one. That is all I have for the birthday bonus episode of the Amidon Planet Podcast. If you are looking for ways to support the next year of the podcast, you can do a bunch of things that you probably already know about. Subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. You can like the Amidon Planet Podcast Facebook page, or the Amidon Planet Facebook page. You can sign up for the Amidon Planet email list. You can do that on either the Facebook page. There's a sign up button there, but you can also do it at amidonplanet.com, the website that I have. And also, I have a feeling that those that sign up for the email list could be in the very near future having some coffee, a chance for some free coffee. We've done that a few times, and I have a feeling A birthday for the podcast could be a chance for a gift for some of you out there. You can also engage with me in social media. So Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all on the handle at Amidon Planet. I'm always looking for questions and comments related to the episode, but I will also be looking for general questions, suggestions for books to review, people to talk to, or other content to feature on the Amidon Planet podcast. And again, just as I mentioned before, some of those suggestions are already leading into episodes coming up in the near future. And they don't know this, but those that have suggested some of that stuff, I'm going to ask to come on the podcast to talk about why they suggested it. So if you want to get on here, or maybe that's a good way to do it. Or if you don't like that sort of thing, don't worry about it. Still suggest stuff. Finally, if you are looking for another way to support the podcast, and one way that this podcast has been supported greatly is through purchases through the Amidon Planet store. The basically any support that we've needed for this next year has already come through purchases through the Amidon Planet store. But we're seeking to do some more things in increasing audio quality and doing some other things with the Amidon Planet platform. So we're always looking for more support. So if you are looking for a Be the Good shirt, or if you're looking for some other stuff, you can go to the link to the Amidon Planet store, which you can find in Instagram in the bio. There's a link there. You can also look for links on AmidonPlanet.com in both the header and the footer to the store. So thank you again for taking the time to listen to this and all the other podcasts, but specifically this birthday bonus episode of the Amidon Planet Podcast. And thank you for a fantastic first year. Special thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. And finally, thank you to all of you out there who are seeking to be better, teach better, and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do.